So which one is the better Nike daily trainer? Is it the Nike Zoom Fly 5 or the Tempo Next Percent? Things are about to get interesting, so let's get into it. But before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're already subscribed watching this content. Thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Strava for all sorts of other social media and race updates and things like that. So without further ado, specs for both shoes here, respectively. We'll just go into them real briefly, starting with the older of the two shoes, the 2020 controversial / spectacular shoe that I think I can think of, which is the Tempo Next Percent itself. The shoe itself is about 8.8, 8.9 ounces in my size, which is about 8.5. That puts it about like 250 grams on average. Stack heights, we got 45 in the heel, 35 in the forefoot. Very tall shoe, 10 millimeter offset. Also, very much a forefoot based strike shoe, as I can recall from personal experience. One of the things I do recall with this shoe specifically was that running with it for 2 weeks straight ended up breaking a lot of my toenails because of the forefoot emphasis in this shoe being so high, plus that stack height, plus this not so powerful, I guess, frontal cover of the shoe that's sort of like this plastic painted rubbery covering. But yeah, it was this is the most mixed review shoe I've ever worked with because I both love and hate this shoe at the same time, and I always seem to find myself coming back to trying to buy and run in this shoe on a daily trainer kind of basis. Which then, this brings us to the Nike Zoom Fly 5, which is a shoe that's a little bit newer to the market in comparison to Tempo Next Percent, which this shoe sits at about, in my size, like 10 to 10.1 ounces on average in terms of weight. We got a stack height in the heel of 41 millimeters, and then we have a forefoot area of about either 33 or 31 millimeters. I'll put it up here. It's about an 8 to 10 millimeter stack height. I think this is just resembling more of the Vaporfly Next Percent build overall, just to give you that slightly more toe strike kind of spot, but also gives you a little bit of heel as well in the shoe, just to kind of mix and match the muscle groups you're going to be using. As we'll kind of get into that a little bit later, we'll explain it a little bit more in depth. But yeah, other things to note about this shoe in comparison to the Tempo Next Percent is, of course, the technologies used between both shoes, right? In here, we have a nylon slash, it's supposed to be the replacement for the carbon plate. It's this nylon plate that runs the entire length of the shoe, more or less from where this orange foam kind of runs and then, you know, kind of cuts off here. And then we have, you know, this React heel, ZoomX going all the way across, and we have another piece of React. We have the nylon plate, and then we have an Air Zoom pod. That's the technology kind of going in here. Lots of moving parts. Somehow it all still works really well in this shoe. It's kind of honestly mind-boggling how well it works. That if there was a carbon plate in this shoe, could it be better? I don't really know. Which then kind of takes us to the Zoom Fly 5, right? Here we have this ZoomX running all the way across, in addition to a carbon plate running the length of the shoe as well. It's not a nylon, it's definitely a carbon plate. And the caveat here is just the performances between both shoes, obviously, right? I mean, it's not really rocket science to know that both shoes are built for two entirely different purposes, but have similar features in both, which make them, in a way, compatible and competitive daily trainers in that kind of sense. So, just to start with the Tempo Next Percent again, the mesh layering on top is super thin with like this also, I guess, like mid-foot sock that can be kind of seen through the duration of the shoe that just kind of runs the length here following the shoelace line. It's just, this is such a minimalist shoe overall. You know, there's a lot of moving pieces in terms of the outsole and getting a nice rebound off the ground, but in the upper area there isn't just a whole lot. Maybe there's a little bit more material in the heel just to kind of prevent, you know, this heel from caving in or being unstable while you're running, but overall that's kind of it. However you tie the shoe on top is like what kind of sits. There's no other pieces to kind of lock you down in this sort of area. And then of course with this toe box area, not a whole lot of reinforcement as well. It's just super minimalist, so you have to have a really good sock to be compatible with this particular shoe if you don't want it to essentially be a bad ride overall. And that's kind of where some of the issues lie when people start running with this shoe, is just having a bad sock. I've always had thicker socks when I've run with this shoe, and I've not really had any sort of issues in that sort of sense. Now, the Zoom Fly 5, this one gets some mixed reviews as well, mostly from the vantage point of it being kind of a stiff, not super fun shoe to run in, and it's just not giving them the experience, them being the runner, the experience of what a carbon plate running shoe is supposed to feel like. But I add some caveats, right? One, the shoe weighs a little bit more. The material on the top is a little bit more dense, resembling what seems to be more of like a Pegasus 37 to 39 type of layering. We do have that interlace sock just following the shoelaces, but it's not really the basis for holding down the shoes. We do have the textile upper that's more or less the shoelace weave pattern here kind of going on. But the idea here is that the shoe is built more for distance running as it's being marketed. However, I think it still has a mix of being a fast shoe if you know how to properly utilize it, right? So with carbon plate shoes, you don't want a heel strike. You maybe want to consider a midfoot strike. This shoe, I'll kind of get into why it's kind of tricky. But here, like forefoot strikes in a carbon plate shoe are the way to go, because you want to, you want to compress that carbon plate and then get that decompression, that rebound effect out of the shoe following your strike. So if people don't like the shoe too much, there's a couple of things to consider. One, just checking your stride itself. Maybe you do have that midfoot, forefoot strike, which is okay, fine. Then you kind of got me on that one. But the other point here is that I would not hold this carbon plate shoe to the same standard of something like, a Tempo Next Percent with a nylon plate, a Vaporfly Next Percent, or any other sort of carbon plate daily trainer that exists on the market, because this shoe, again, weighs a little bit more than them, has a little bit more material, and is more to give you a simulation of daily training with a carbon plate shoe. So when you put on something like a Vaporfly Next Percent or an Alpha Fly, you already know and have already experienced the stiffness of the carbon plate, but now you can put a little bit more speed and a little bit more, I guess, strain on it overall. You'll put a little more strain on yourself, but you can expand a little bit more because those shoes will allow you to in that sort of sense. Some similarities. There is actually one major similarity between both of these shoes. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you a second to think about it. And that's the second. It's that both of these shoes are technically illegal to race in for elite athletes. Obviously, because they already break the rules of the 40 millimeter stack height heel rule and also forefoot rule. So 45 in the heel, 41 in this heel. Makes some very tall training shoes overall, which is kind of the point. The higher the stack heights, the shoe can become a little bit more unstable, but it also provides a little bit more comfort and some more distance between you and like the concrete, for example. So I think I may have talked about this in the past. It's like, what can both shoes be used in tandem for training with? And I think I said with the Tempo Next Percent that because of the stack height variables, I think this shoe would do better to be a training partner for the Vaporfly Next Percent series shoe. Despite it having air zoom pods and this nylon plate, you would think, why not the Alpha Fly? It's more or less because that offset is leaning more for this kind of toe strike, definitely more of a forefoot strike, and because the Vaporfly Next Percent series has a more forefoot emphasis striking area for the shoe, I would stick for it more in that direction. And now with the Zoom Fly 5, the stack height being more of that 8mm offset as well, it can resemble more of your Vaporfly Next Percent training regiment, and it can also fit into more of the Alpha Fly 2 regiment because they would have the exact same offset. The technology is not necessarily the same, but the stiffness of both shoes is kind of there at slower speeds, so this could be a pretty decent training partner for the Alpha Fly 2. It's still too soon for me to tell if that would be the case, but that's just kind of me going off that sort of assertion if we were to stick within the Nike shoe family in this particular case. So I think that's all I've got for both of these shoes in particular. If I had to choose which one would be my daily trainer, I think it's a no-brainer that despite the lifespan of this shoe being just absolutely terrible, I would still like to daily train in a Tempo Next Percent. Now, that's kind of where the trade-off comes here, right? Is that this shoe is going to last you significantly longer than 150 to like even 100 miles, because this, This shoe, like these pods, will blow up in 100, 150 plus miles if you're more of an aggressive forefoot striking runner like I am, and you'll just have to exchange them out if you're like on a Nike membership program, basically. So yeah, that's kind of the deal with that in terms of those daily trainers. So the trade-off is, do you want a really fast, unique, once-in-a-lifetime kind of ride in a shoe that'll last you 100 and 150 plus miles, sometimes 200 if you're lucky? Or do you want a more stable, reliable, but slightly stiff daily trainer that doesn't have as many moving parts, is a little bit heavier, has that comfort, but also has a few things to the shoe that kind of make it, I guess, not the fastest shoe in the world? That kind of is what it comes down to when you start wanting to buy these. But yeah, personal opinion, I go for the Tempo Next Percent because I like the riskier shoe for like the more unique reward of the strike, the experience of the run, and so forth. So I think I'm going to end the video here. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts about both shoes or different experiences, let me know in the comments below. But I think I'm going to end the video here. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.